Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning, I'm Jeff Kellam. Welcome to this week's edition of Encounter. We're back on my back porch today with a couple of guests, and so you'll hear some birds, maybe the wind chimes, and maybe the local helicopter from Lockheed Martin down the road. But despite what might be some little inconveniences audio-wise, we welcome you to this Encounter program. I serve as the Parish Associate at the Union Presbyterian Church in Endicott in the Union District. Here's a quotation. This is from a book, Ernest Hemingway on Writing. He wrote in a letter, "There's no rule on how it is to write. Sometimes it comes easily and perfectly. Sometimes it's like drilling rock and then blasting it out with charges." When was the last time in this age of tweets and texts and quick emails, when was the last time you wrote a lengthy letter and thought a little bit about composition? Or maybe you've written a poem, either free verse or you were worried about some meter or the rhyme. Maybe you have a blog or a journal. Maybe you write just for the pleasure of writing down a story. How about a family story, something that you've been thinking about, want to remember? Or maybe you want to write about the troubling time that we're living in now, just thinking about how you might pass this on to another generation. Well, writing, as Hemingway said, can be a struggle, or it can be terribly freeing. It can be profoundly satisfying. It can be therapeutic. We have a couple of guests today to help us think about writing. They are both published authors. First, Karen Bernardo, we welcome you to the Encounter program. Karen is a writer, an editor, and a publisher, and has a website that we'll be telling you about. And then Bob White is our other guest. Bob is a retired minister. You'll find his column now and then in the local newspaper. And he also has published 7 books in print, and we'll be talking about the writing process for Bob. First, you were actually a librarian for a while, weren't you, in Owego?
I was the library director from 2005 to 2012. Then I left for a couple of years, came back in 2014, and retired again in 2017. So yes.
And I see the two of you met before there's a workshop that you've offered called Writing for Grown-Ups, featuring 2 Southern Tier authors, Karen Bernardo and Bob White. But let's go back to when writing became important to you, beyond being critiqued by, maybe a freshman composition teacher.
I don't think that I ever really made a connection between writing and school. Writing was something that I've done as long as I can remember. I know that I made little tiny books about the size of a large postage stamp for the dolls in my dollhouse. And I actually wrote tiny little stories in them that had about 50 words, because that was all that would fit in the book. Yeah.
They'd be very short stories.
They were extremely short stories. And writing is just something I have always done.
Yeah. And Bob, what about you? When did you begin writing?
I ended up with a bachelor's degree in meteorology and became a weatherman. But little did I know, after about a year of that, I was asked to come to Washington and get in on the ground floor of the weather satellite program, brand new Tyros weather satellite. Well, I worked in that for a number of years, and as a result, people wanted to know what was going on. So we had to constantly write whatever we were doing, write it up for publication in national journals and international journals. And one thing led to another, and over about 30 years, I did a great deal of professional non-fiction writing.
Yeah. Now, you've both been published. What does that mean to you, to to have your books in print so that others can read them, something beyond your writing for your own satisfaction?
Well, to me, being published is, there's a whole big thing now with being self-published or being traditionally published. I don't think it makes any difference. Yeah. To me, being published simply means that it's gotten printed or rendered in some fashion so that other people can share what's going on in my head.
So it's a matter of self-expression. Right, Bob?
Karen has really a much stronger background in writing than I do. She hasn't told you that. But she graduated from Bard?
No, I went to Bard for a year. I graduated from Binghamton University, but I have a degree in literature and creative writing.
Yeah, and I never got into this because I was in meteorology and then into ministry, and I carried the two over in terms of writing. I've written a lot of articles, a number of articles for publication while I was a minister too. But then when I retired, there were two things I wanted to do, and one of them was to learn how to write fiction. I didn't know how to do that, and so I went back to college in England when we were living there, and took a creative writing course, and then spent 5 years trying to get published. Fiction is a very competitive field. Yes. And after a while, I think I had a 500-word piece published in a magazine out of Pittsburgh, a national magazine. And for some strange reason, it was like turning a switch. After that, things became much easier getting published. And so when it came time, and it was Karen, as a matter of fact, as I remember, you were sitting at the end of the table. We were in our writers group, our critique group, and she said to me one day in the group, you know, you should be writing books rather than short stories. You're better at that. I don't know where that came from. I don't know how she came up with this, but I remember the words so distinctly, so I sat down and I wrote my first book. Yeah. And I'll never forget when the proof came from the publisher and printer, and I held it, the UPS guy delivered it, or FedEx somebody, and I opened it up and I held this book and I put it close to my chest, and it was...
But not close to your microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. And it was the closest thing I can imagine a man could ever have felt about delivering a baby. It just felt like it was something that had been born and that I had produced, and it was very emotional.
Yep. You know, the two of you, we've been talking about writing, and maybe some of the folks who are in the audience are thinking about maybe they played with the idea of writing, or maybe it's never occurred to them to sit down and write something. It might be helpful to offer a little bit of advice for those on how to just get started as they begin to think about putting their own thoughts down on paper. And how does one begin without worrying about being critiqued, you know, having somebody look at your work and tell you that you're not doing it right?
I would say, if you like to read poetry, try writing what you like to read. If you like to read short stories, try writing what you like to read. It sounds simple, but a lot of people don't think of that.
Well, doesn't it take a good reader to make
Definitely.
a good writer? But not that you'd want to copy the style of your favorite author.
That's not even a bad idea, at least at the beginning.
Karen, when I went to your website, and I have to say that's how I found out a little bit about you, through your website. It's called Story Bites. Tell us a little bit about the website, what we might find there.
Story Bites started off being a lot of little short pieces on short stories that I love. For example, Hills Like White Elephants by Ernest Hemingway. And I would write maybe a page about it. Sometimes I gave away the ending. I tried not to. And my goal really is to get you to go read it. Yeah. And there would normally be a link at the bottom of the page where you could either find the book online, the story online, or you could find a book that it contains. And the website just sort of grew from there. People have asked me to edit their books, and if you want me to do that, you can contact me through the website. People have asked me to proofread their books that they are pretty sure they're going to self-publish, and if you want me to do that, contact me through the website. It just sort of grew.
Let's go back now to thinking about what advice do you have for people who are thinking about writing?
I guess the first thing I would ask is, what is it you really want to talk about? What is it that's within you that you'd like to see out on paper, or just, let come out of you? Yeah. And there's a school of thought that says, write what you know. But I'm not sure, as a fiction writer, that always works. It could be dangerous. And it could be dangerous. You have to be very careful not to offend at the same time. And so I kind of try to help bring things out of people and say, well, what would happen if you sat down and you just started writing whatever came to mind? Don't correct it. Don't even think about using the wrong word or the wrong phrase. Just let it flow. Yep. And see what happens, and then let's talk again the second time.
Right, right. Would you agree that it's kind of therapeutic sometimes to write? Maybe a little bit of family history or something of your own story, something that happened to you in the past that you might find helpful to put into words and put those words on paper?
It can be. I wrote a piece once about my mother and a rather traumatic incident that happened when I was 5. And I had a friend read it. This would be Liz Rosenberg, who is a professor at Binghamton University and a very good writer in her own right. And she said, I'm not sure you want to publish this. It's painful. Yes. And your mother is still alive. And I don't see where anyone would benefit from your publishing this. Rethink it. Yeah. Yeah. And I said, well, I was angry, and the anger was still coming through. And she said, rethink your anger. Are you angry as a 5-year-old child? Or is that the way that you would look at it today? Mm-hmm. And I realized, well, no, actually, that is not the way I would look at it today. Yeah. That's the reflection of the anger I felt as a 5-year-old child. Yeah. And she was right. Yeah. So I rewrote it. I liked the second version better. I thought the first version was really good, but I thought the second version was kinder. Yes.
Yeah. Mm. It was cathartic for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Jeff, I was just thinking. Excuse me, I'm interrupting. We have had a friend who's passed on, and I remember he wrote. He wasn't necessarily a writer. I mean, he could write, but he wrote for his children his thoughts, his memories, his memoirs, if you will. And the way he did it was, he took stories that he remembered in life with his kids, yeah, or in his life, and he would write a 1 or 2 page story. He would keep it short, and every page or two was a new story, and then he put that together into one volume, and that was his gift to his children. And it's something that anyone can do. We all have our stories, we all have our memories, and some you may not want to publish, but you might want to pass on to your children.
A wonderful way to start. If you're thinking about starting writing, right, that's a great place to start. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, kind of writing is it's helpful on a lot of different levels. because it helps you to clarify or to better understand or work through. And if there's a safe way to share that part of your story with others, they too can grow from it or learn from it. Well, an example of that, I posted on Facebook some old family pictures. It was an old family wedding from years ago, me and my cousins, and my son, who has one sister, and I mean we had 2 kids, 1 boy, 1 girl, and the rest of our family, extended family, lives out of town. So Jim looked at these pictures, and it was kind of eye-opening to him to think about my family history being much broader, with aunts and uncles and cousins all living in the area. And he expressed a desire to see more of those pictures, to learn, I guess, more of his old dad's story. So pictures are one thing, but putting it into words would be another thing that would be helpful. Our guests today are Bob White, who is a retired Presbyterian minister, and he is a published author. We'll talk a little bit about his books during this program. And then also Karen Bernardo, who is a former librarian in Owego. She is an author, a publisher, and an editor. And we'll be talking more with both of them about writing. How does it feel to pass your story on, to have someone else look at it and then give you direction about, as they might have done with Karen?
I think if anyone is serious about having other people read what they've written, and they really want something of quality and nothing to embarrass them, I think it's absolutely necessary to have good editing and good critique and good review of your work. Not everybody's willing to have that happen. I've had people come to me with a full manuscript and a book, and they've asked for my opinion. I've given it to them and then found out they really don't want this. You've got to be very, very careful trying to help a new writer with information that they really don't want. Sure. But I believe it's absolutely necessary to have good editing, to be able to take critique. That's how Karen and I met. We've been in the same critique group for, oh my goodness, I'm going to say a long time. I won't even attempt how many years. And
I'm thinking 15.
And Karen has, of all of my 7 books, Karen has reviewed every single one and has been a proofer and a critiquer of my books. So I think that's an experience that we share, and it's an absolutely necessary experience.
I opened the program by sharing a little bit of this book called Ernest Hemingway on Writing, and I really like this particular quotation, which I'm going to read. Hemingway writes, "When I was starting a new story sometimes, and I couldn't get it going, I would sit in front of the fire and squeeze the peel of the little oranges into the edge of the flame and watch the sputter of blue that they made. I would stand and look out over the roofs of Paris and think, do not worry. You've always written before, and you will write now. All you have to do is write one true sentence. Write the truest sentence that you know." So finally, I would write one true sentence, and then go on from there. It was easy then, because there was always that one true sentence that I knew, or had seen, or had heard someone say. If I started to write elaborately, or like someone introducing or presenting something, I found that I could cut that scroll work or ornament out and throw it away, and start with the first true, simple, declarative sentence I had written. So it was a book called A Movable Feast.
I love that book. It's actually on my nightstand. I absolutely love that book, yes. And I agree with him.
Yeah. Karen, let's talk a little bit about your books. What have you brought some of them with you?
Okay, I'll talk about the last one I did first. This was done in March of 2019 with my grandson Michael. And Michael and I have been writing together since he was about 4. He's now 6. And the way that we started, I was explaining this to Bob earlier. The way that we started was we would cut out pictures of things that he was interested in, and he would tell me about the pictures. I would type up what he had told me, and we'd put it in a book. Yeah. And then he would take it home and he would have a book about construction vehicles or whatever. And I actually did this in his class, Charles F. Johnson Elementary School in Endicott. I did this in his class this spring with the kids there. So the top book, which is called Play Ball, is a very embellished version of one of those stories. Michael came up with the basic idea, and I turned it into a story. And Michael was thrilled about that. He's thrilled about the fact that you can buy his book on Amazon, and you can buy his book at bookstores.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is just amazing.
How old is Michael now?
6.
So there are lots of stories to come.
Oh, yes. We did one yesterday, in fact. The other 3 are part of a series which is a cozy mystery series. Think Murder, She Wrote as a genre. And it is about an elderly woman who lives in sort of subsidized housing, I would say, in Binghamton. And she and her male companion solve mysteries. I just enjoy writing them. I like reading that kind of book myself. And so there again, figure out what you love to read, and you'll probably be able to write it.
And it's funny. Karen writes very humorously.
On purpose.
Yeah.
So Karen, when you're writing, do you know how the story's going to come out? Do you know how the plot's going to come to an end?
I absolutely am a plotter. I have an outline. The first chapter is very loosely outlined, and the outline gets more and more involved as I go on, because I have to make sure that I'm tying in all the loose ends and I'm plotting the red herrings just where they ought to go. Bob, on the other hand, doesn't have a clue, and he just writes, which I think is amazing. I could not do that.
I start with something, a plum, the sentence that Hemingway's talking about. I start with that, and then just like a blossom, just let it grow and see where it goes. That's sort of like allowing the characters to driving the plot. It's called character-driven writing. And the danger of that is the characters can run away with a story if you're not careful. And that happened to me, and I had to almost throw the whole thing out and start all over. But all my work is character-driven.
So tell me about a couple of your books. We don't have time to go.
Okay, yeah, I started with this one that this friend we were talking about a minute ago got me going on the Indian Maiden here in Owego, and was able to come up with, after doing research, a lot of information that allowed me to have a fictional story. Then I wrote the true story about that because people were asking for it. At the time also, gas drilling was big, and I spent a few years researching that and wrote the first book on gas drilling, which was a fictional novel, a love story, and then did one for a friend who survived cancer. That was nonfiction, of course.
Right.
And then the last 3 were a triplet about a couple who cozy mysteries that happened in England and used all of our experiences living around the world and living in England and Africa and all. So,
you've both used the term cozy. What does that mean in this context?
What is a cozy mystery? That's where somebody else other than the officials solves the case, like Murder, She Wrote. Okay? Or Father Brown. Or something like that.
Okay, I thought maybe it was the kind of book you just cozied up to. And
well, you do that too.
Right. So, what's next, Bob? You're writing.
I've been working on one, Jeff, for over 15 years, and it's the toughest thing I've ever done. And it's about people it's about me because people have come to me and said, "You've done so much in your life. I'd love to read it."
Right.
And so I couldn't do it, and a dear friend who's one of my mentors suggested I fictionalize it, and that's been bugging me for over 15 years, how to fictionalize my own autobiography, but that's what I'm working on.
And Karen, have you thought about your next project? What you're going to head toward next?
I have illustrated 2 children's books, and they're both about Michael. Actually, no, one of them is not about Michael. And I've also started working on another cozy mystery, part of this same series.
Time is running kind of short, but let's talk about your websites. Karen, your website is called Story Bites. Where can we find it?
www.storybites, STORYBITES.com.
And Bob, you have a website also.
Mine is at booksbybobwhite.com, and it's got more information than you ever want to know.
Really enjoy this. I do some writing myself. I have a couple of blogs, and don't have very many followers or readers, but it's I don't really care. It's kind of fun for me to just write down my thoughts and share them. It's helpful for me by myself, whether anybody reads it or not. Our 2 guests today have been Bob White, a retired minister and an author, and Karen Bernardo is a former librarian, and she is an author, an editor, publisher. We thank you both for being with us, and we thank you also for joining us for Encounter. It's produced in cooperation with the Broome County Council of Churches and WBNG TV, and our thanks to the Town Square media stations for playing the audio portion of our program. I'm Jeff Kellam, Parish Associate of the Union Presbyterian Church in Endicott, hoping that in the coming week you'll stay well and be gentle with people and with yourself.